Let me begin by apologizing for my absence yesterday. I missed a fascinating day, but if you're working on East Asia and in any Indian think tank these days, you're going to be incredibly busy doing events and seminars and talks and visits by researchers, scholars, not just from East Asia, but people who are working on East Asia and who want to come and view, understand India's perspectives on these regions. So I had one of those days yesterday in office, and I regret my absence actually. So talking about Xinjiang ethnic violence, unrest in the north-western province of China, what I'm going to do is I'll talk about back into the global focus of attention after it was out of focus for a while. So in 2014, there were 300 deaths in separate incidents of violence. This data is from official Chinese sources, so you could safely assume that the actual number of deaths could be between 20 and 40% higher from the official data. As compared to 2013, you can see when the number of deaths were 115. When I talk of big incidents of violence, this picture is from the attack on Urumqi marketplace, in which 40 people were killed in one incident of violence, which was until then the biggest, the single biggest incident of terrorist violence in China of 2014, May, June. Before that, you had a Kunming railway station attack. Again, idea of spreading panic and unrest taking new forms of terrorism, which was largely unseen in China. Public incidents, suicide bombings, ambush, knife attacks, syringe incidents, etc. Attacks on public place was actually rare. And previously, the form of violence that was happening was attacks on state offices like police bureaus, civic offices, state agencies, etc. So 2013-14, you could argue that the violence in Xinjiang, or at least the part of violence in Xinjiang, has taken the form of terrorism as we understand in India pretty well. 2013 October probably was a turning point, symbolic incident of attack on Tiananmen Square. Explosion has killed 2 people and all 3 others in the SUV that were traveling there. And there's a video of this incident available on the internet. It's not to be shown or shared in an incident like this, but if you have, if you are space for violence, and if you can watch that video, you'll understand that number of deaths in this incident was probably more than 10 as such. So Xinjiang has a bit of history of violence. There have been riots in 97, bombings of 92, 2009 riots, 1990, when the new wave of violence has begun, actually. In Xinjiang, there's a big state organization called XPCC, the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. The XPCC came into being in 1954, mid-1950s, when the Sino-Soviet rift was becoming bigger and bigger. China feared that the Soviet attack was imminent and that Xinjiang borders were vulnerable. So the XPCC came into being. A large-scale Han migration into Xinjiang took place. And XPCC took care of the 200 square kilometers of the boundary areas in Xinjiang. Now XPCC is one of the biggest employers. It actually controls about 20% of the territory in Xinjiang. In 2 biggest areas of economic activity in Xinjiang, 2 biggest employing institutions of Xinjiang, of the agriculture and petroleum production, XPCC is at the center of that process, and it has 2.5 million workers, about 1 million being under agriculture and rest being in the other areas. But XPCC is also ethnically divided, 87% of XPCC being migrant workers. Now you can call them settled workers after 40 to 50 years of being settled in Xinjiang, but initially it was mostly migrant workers. So the ethnic imbalance of Xinjiang with immigration taking place because of XPCC and because of the related activities. So this is where one of the problem areas of Han and minority relationship takes place, is there. China has thought of integrating Xinjiang into mainland with assimilationist policies, with a melting pot kind of ideology, but it has not worked in a way. What happened is segregation of the 2 ethnic communities within Xinjiang. Why it did, I'll come to that later. But you can notice that Xinjiang's demographic profile has gradually changed in a big manner. Uh, and coming back to the point of role of the XPCC, you can clearly see the northern Xinjiang and southern Xinjiang being different, kind of different territories, two territories within one within Xinjiang. So in northern Xinjiang, economic development is higher, population density is more, industrial density is higher, exploration activities are more, which is not the case in southern Xinjiang. In 2009-10, the average annual incomes in southern Xinjiang is less than one-third of the entire province's annual income. Uh, and southern Xinjiang borders connect to South Asia, and that's where we have a bit of an issue at our hands. Uh, and southern Xinjiang has also been an active area for terrorists trained in Pakistan with Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and other organizations which have roots in the province. So if you look at the map on the slide, northern Xinjiang is where XPCC operates, southern Xinjiang is where it does not, as much as it does in the northern regions. And that is where the distinction of northern and southern Xinjiang is there, and which China is also beginning to acknowledge gradually. And the changing nature of extremism, which I spoke of, the radical elements had been there, but the Chinese state's excessive policies on stability has created more sympathizers also for radical elements within the Xinjiang ethnic Uyghur community. At the same time, why blast and terrorist activities in Xinjiang become more symbolic of the alleged world struggle against world hegemonic order? Because China is seen to be a normal country more and more as a powerful country. An attack on China, on China's mainland, perhaps, is seen as a success, which was not the case before 9/11. So China's emergence as a power also increases its symbolic value as a target of a terrorist incident. How the Chinese state responded to Xinjiang is what I have highlighted in this slide, and this is also a part of the problem because Chinese state has had a hands-on and hands-off approach. So what we had during the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution was that a destruction of relics in the name of eliminating the old and creating the new. What followed after that was opening up in the 1980s. China practically opened the China-POK borders, land movement between Xinjiang and China, Xinjiang and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia for those who wanted to take religious education in those countries and come back and bring that training and education back to Xinjiang open. Also the entry of Wahhabism and religious ethnic identification increased in the aftermath of that. So we had this period of 80s of opening up to the Islamic world, so to speak, for Xinjiang. And 1993-94 was the first phase when major incident of violence began in Xinjiang, and when the security state of China came down as a hard state within Xinjiang. So then comes the point C, the return of the security state after the violence in 1994. So there's one largely undocumented incident of major violence, which states that 2,500 people were arrested in from one factory location for engaging in violence, vandalism, and destruction. And the number of deaths was unaccounted or unshared with the world at large as such. So these are the three phases, hands-on and hands-off. At one point of time, you destroy the old. At other point of time, you bring the outside influence within your country. And afterwards, you try to clamp down everything and in every possible way that you can. So consequence of that also in the recent past, as many scholars and observers have noted, there's a form of Arabization of Uyghur society, which was not the case in the earlier years. For example, you must have read the issues of burqa being banned in Urumqi, for example. This was a traditional dress of Uyghur women, and more you see women wearing burqa in this part of the world, which was not the case. And there's more and more pressure for people to conform with the norms of conservative Islamic identity. I'm not necessarily saying that the burqa necessarily means a conservative and extremist form of Islamic identity, but that is how the identity of Uyghurs has changed gradually. For example, also the second example is important, that until the mid 1990s, restaurants serving pork were common in Xinjiang and within Urumqi. Of late, we have heard that such places have also been given police protection, and Uyghurs who went to these restaurants gradually began to be labeled as un-Islamic by the extremists within the society. Whereas which was not the case in the 1980s, when Han and Uyghur workers who probably worked in the same coal mines or same oil fields, they could eat together, probably on the same table, but that is less and less the case. So that is the issue of state response versus external influence coming into the picture. So in the recent Chinese responses have been based on two specific strategies: improved internal security budgets. It's interesting that China's internal security budget has surpassed national security budget actually since 2010, 9-10, but it has continued even now. And now we are talking of declared budgets. And second important strategy of the Chinese strategy of control and is information management. And it's one of the strong pillars of anti-terrorism policy. And it might be yielding some success to the Chinese state also. For example, I showed you the slide of the Kunming railway station attack. In that case, one news report states that there was a rapid action kind of a force right outside the station, but they had to wait for permission from authorities before they could undertake the action against the terrorists. But the second report, and this first report went out of news within 15 days. I mean, some of the blogs still have that. But the second report, and that still circulates, is that one of the guys from that rapid action forces was so brave that he eliminated 4 of the extremists within a matter of 2 minutes. Now, you can imagine that when a mass attack on a railway station is happening, it's practically impossible for one brave soldier, however brave he or she may be, to eliminate 4 terrorists within a space of 2 minutes. But his story was highlighted eventually in the Chinese media, the unnamed soldier. So that is the way information management and control has been happening there. I'll talk of the external linkages of Uyghur extremism in Xinjiang. First being the ATM's linkages with the and the subsequent more violent avatar of it, the Turkestan Islamic Party. It has links with the TTP. When the TTP leader Abdul Shakur Turkestani was killed in a drone strike in 2012, 17 militants of the two groups, TTP and ATM, were also killed in that group. Now, there was a subsequent news that came out was that this fellow was being considered for the top post of Al-Qaeda in the aftermath of Osama bin Laden's killing, which gives you a kind of picture of the kind of homogenization between these two groups that is there already. And that is where China is pressurizing Pakistan to operate and eliminate these groups. So if you have seen the pattern of violence in Xinjiang, every time there's a big incident in Xinjiang, we have a huge, big Pakistani official visit to China, and the news reports that comes out that the issues of mutual interest were discussed. So it's nothing but Xinjiang that they are discussing. And we also had one visit by Pakistan Army Chief that was practically unscheduled in the year 2011 or 12, after one of the biggest terrorist incidents in Xinjiang there. But Chinese media is also refraining from naming Pakistan as one of the as the source of these terrorist training and learning of extremist methods. For example, it states that the terrorists were trained in a certain South Asian country, and it's not a big secret of which that South Asian country might be. This is the next slide that we prepared at IDSA GIS lab actually, of mapping the terrorist incidents in southern Xinjiang over the past 2 years based on the Chinese news information data. So you can see that the incidents are closely clustered, and this is where China's next big project, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is going to be. It is there. I mean, we already had the Karakoram Highway, and it's been renamed, its extension has been renamed as the CPEC. But it's closely linked with China's concerns in the southern Xinjiang region for the desire to develop, for the desire to balance development and control extremist influence in the region. This is a larger picture of the CPEC that we see, the eastern corridor of the CPEC. And if you follow Pakistani media, CPEC has also generated a kind of debate, competition among provinces within Pakistan as to who should benefit from it first. And as of now, there are 3 envisaged routes of CPEC, but basically moving from uh, Xinjiang to the Gwadar port. This is the eastern route. There's a central route and there will be a western route as well, going closer to the Afghan border. So CPEC is a form of carrot that China is offering to Pakistan for controlling the ETIM and related organizations. It will also help China to address security concerns, better eyes, better control, more eyes on the ground, and more information and management of movement between China and Pakistan. CPEC will also be an energy route for China eventually. Uh, so I'll conclude by stating the obvious and easy points actually. Xinjiang has been subject to influences more by political forces and processes outside China than those within China. So in the 1980s, Chinese forces encouraged, there is actually evidence that China encouraged Xinjiang extremists to join Taliban's in Afghanistan because they never envisaged the breakdown of the Soviet and the ethnic states within the Soviet Union, and that it might encourage kind of ethno-nationalism in Xinjiang as unprecedented. But it came back and clamped down. So the extremism in Xinjiang is also no less measure a creation of Chinese states, alteration between hands-off and hands-on policy that I have discussed previously. Chinese state has also been working in Xinjiang in a learning by doing kind of a manner, and which is one of the axioms used for Chinese reform process in general. Learning by doing, crossing the river by feeling the pebbles under your feet. That's one of the phrases used. But it has always sought short-term results of control and management of problem than solutions in the end. In the end, some Uyghurs have also associated themselves with Islamic State, 700 according to media from China and Turkey. But it might be overestimated by between 200 and 500 according to open sources, actually Western sources. Some Uyghurs have also associated themselves with Islamic State, which is a grand state idea as against their original approach of having an independent ethnic state based on the Central Asian model. Showcases you that the fight in Xinjiang is urgent and extreme at this point of time. Thank you for your attention.